this one should be explosives.
Yeah, that's way more than enough.
No, I think this one should be
Taken off. It's going.
no, because this is dislocated.
I see. I see.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Go ahead. Bismillah.
منحوط الشوية من دول هنا
هو لو جو يعني لو في
مش على اخوات انا قصدي على الست على الرجال
ربنا
ستة بس تمام ده حاجة مؤلمة جدا ده حاجة مؤسفة جدا ازاي صح
Can somebody close that door, please? Assalamu alaikum.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته الحمد لله
الدنيا بردانة. It's cold here.
لابس كويس لابس بالغطا بتاعها عشان
Is it cold? We can adjust the temperature now before we begin.
Yeah, and it is a little bit on the cold side, but
We can
What
warm you
is
up
it-
with
what
a
is the
few
temperature?
nice hadith.
hmm?
We can warm you up with some Quran.
more than enough.
what is the temperature here now?
I think it would be like
65.
66 is a normal set temperature.
Wow, no 60 make it 69
Oh, wow.
okay 68 like the government the government do you remember during Nixon
Carter, that's Carter.
I thought it was Carter or Nixon
No, no, Carter.
Carter
Carter. 68 بس يعني احنا
أنا في البيت مش أقل مش
70.
أقل من 71
اوكي انا عندي 70.
آه.
بيني وبينك يعني 70 بس لما اجي اقعد على المكتب احط 70 ولا قاعد على المكتب ما اتحركش
طبعا
لانك انت بتكون بتتحرك وانا بستقبل قاعد على المكتب
يا صدق
يلا الحمد لله.
الحمد لله
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, as-salatu was-salamu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. So, last week we stopped after we spoke about, for example, the kind of conversation that a person could have as an example of different mediums of dawah. And we talked about the example of Ahmed and Bob, who were co-workers. Today we move on to the rules of organized programs. For example, our program is Lifting the Veil. That kind of fits the exact description. So what are some guidelines with regards to doing programs like that? So with the growth of the popularity of dialogues and trialogues, lectures and debates, careful consideration must be given to these rules that he mentions, 7 rules. So he says, number 1, know your speaker. When we select somebody to speak at a program, we share the responsibility of what he says. especially if we should have known better. So when we are giving people dawah, we shouldn't just select anybody that is willing to speak, but rather we should, see exactly how they speak, how much their knowledge is, how much they understand the concept, what their manners are. Some people, for example, they may have certain, bad habits. For example, some people tend to always get angry when they are like excited and speaking, and that could kind of give the wrong message. So don't select unreasonable people that are known to be unreasonable at times. Sometimes there might be people that if they're asked a disrespectful question by a non-Muslim, they might lose their temper, and that's not the person that should be speaking. The ability to speak in an inspiring fashion is also a plus. If a speaker bores your community to death at Jummah, why would you want him or her to bore those who we want to share our message with? Also rate your prospective speakers according to the type of audience. They might be the impassioned activist that is good to speak at like demonstrations and rile people up, and there would be that intellectual person that addresses a topic in a calm, cool, intellectual way, and different audiences require different types of speakers, so be careful about that. The Prophet ﷺ said, speak to people according to their level of intelligence, or put people in the place that they belong. So if there's a leader, if there's like a prime minister that's visiting, for example, don't speak to him like a janitor. And if there's a janitor, there might not be a lot of harm in treating him like the prime minister, but if you're speaking terminology which will not be known to him, that would be irrelevant. So treat people according to their level of intelligence, what they're used to. Also, it's mentioned that one of the big things that we kind of habitually do is use a lot of Arabic terminology, even in front of non-Muslims. Sometimes it could be positive when it's like maybe like a individual, and they might really have a good relationship with us, and they might say, what does it mean, like inshallah? And you could tell them that we believe that everything can happen if God wills it. But if you're speaking where people don't have a chance to stop you at every moment you say an Arabic term, then this might not be effective, so be careful about that. There's actually a joke that this guy who had a Muslim coworker, he went around and he said to other people, he said that, how come he keeps talking about a staff gorilla? Is there a gorilla in our staff? So he kept saying astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, and they said staff gorilla. So it could backfire sometimes. Also, he says avoid debates unless this is the main function of your program where you have organized a debate. Other than that, going back and forth usually does not go very well. And since I learned this rule, I don't usually debate people on Facebook, for example. There are some people that have all the time in the world, and they'll write a comment. If you write a response to them, they'll send you back a response that's double the length of your response. If you send a response to them, then it will be 3 times longer next time. And these people have all the time, but the thing is that, are they really looking to learn a lot of the times? They're not looking to learn, they're looking up quick facts on Google and throwing it on you. So he says that debates are like spiritual boxing matches. They get people excited, but they all come away bruised. So, and also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us, do not insult those whom they call upon besides Allah. Even, for example, those that we believe to be false gods, we're not supposed to disrespect them. Because if we disrespect them, then they will disrespect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their animosity and out of spite. Also limit the entire event to, he says, under 2 hours. Because if you go longer than that, then it gets way too long and the people become restless. And even we know that a better formula is that the entire event from beginning to end, including the social hour and the snack time and all of these, should be, if it's within 2 hours, that's good time. Have a clearly defined topic and format. When confusion occurs, disaster is soon to follow. Have a refreshment table and also an intermission if your program is over 2 hours. If you think about it, if you listen to the radio, for example, every 5 or 7 minutes, they will say, it's time for a break. It's time for a break. And one of the brothers in Dawah, he actually hosted a radio talk show in the DC area. And, they would talk about Islam and Islamic topics. And the producers or the radio people, they said, look, you have to take a break, even if it's just to stop and we identify our station, because there are some people who are scanning channels and they don't know what we are listening to. So they get to get the identification of the channel, and the attention span refreshes. Okay, attention span refreshes. So a break is very healthy. Even like, for example, some of our teachers, when they would be teaching like an all-day seminar, and they would notice that, okay, the people, maybe they came back from lunch and they're now getting tired. So they say, okay, everybody stop, everybody stand up, okay, and stretch your arms out, and jump up a little bit. They'll basically get that, because that is very useful to get your attention back. So keep that in mind when it comes to giving people a message about Islam as well. Have a refreshment table, which alhamdulillah we do. Refreshments make an audience feel more at ease, and an intermission of 5 minutes or so helps relieve people of possible distraction. Like, think about, recently when we were at the synagogue, the program, the whole lecture panel time, this is like a attention requiring time. But the snack time is everybody relaxed. So maybe a good idea is to maybe start the program, and like 30 minutes in, you have like a refreshment break. Anybody needs to go use the bathroom, get a snack, and then come back. And maybe, just an idea, maybe it will help ease their defenses that they have put up and help them assimilate into the audience a bit more. He says, please try to do better than cheap chips and no-name soda. Avoid heated political discussions. Politics can be introduced as a topic of interest, but do not be drawn into tangles of rhetoric. Politics is not religion. Understand that. And I have been at Dawah programs where they were setting up tables to invite people to Islam, but what they were really doing were basically criticizing foreign policy. And people agreed with them, but nobody walked away with thinking, yes, I should consider becoming Muslim. So politics is not religion, just understand that. Display free literature before and after your program. This is very important. Remember that most people believe nothing unless they see in writing. And any portable speech you distribute may find its way through many hands that otherwise might not have ever heard of Islam. So basically it's saying that the literature that you're giving out, you don't know who might end up reading it. So do have that literature available, and maybe they will keep it in their pocket, read it later at a time when they're relaxed, so it's always beneficial. The appendices at the conclusion of this book, for example, so this book at the end, he actually gives sample Dawah literatures that we could take out and print flyers from them and then have them available. I have introduced the idea, but nobody has bit on it yet, which is to have rolling stands. Handy, anybody who has handy skills, hint hint, something that's on wheels, for example, and maybe we have one of them that has little pockets where we can put flyers. One of them is for new Muslims and one of them is for non-Muslims. Okay, the new Muslims one could always be here, for example, and the non-Muslims one, we could roll it sometimes in the gym if we have a program there. Otherwise, sometimes we have guests that come and join us for Jummah. It could be there for them. If there's a program that we're doing at the food pantry, for example, when we're giving out food, that whole thing could be, maybe put on a car, rolled up into the car, put over there. If there's a program that we're doing at some other avenue, for example, Saint and the Sultan, okay? If we could maybe have a nice display with glass and nice, beautiful stuff, have it there that people would just come and stop by and they would look at it, it would be very useful. If you remember, I shared with you the story last week of a man who was covered in tattoos from head to toe, had all these weird hairstyles, piercings all over his body, and somebody gave him a flyer about Islam, thinking this guy would never become Muslim, I'm wasting this flyer, but you know what, let me just give it out anyways. And this guy, right at the spot, he kept reading, he kept walking and kept reading, and down the road, they're watching him, he stopped and he's coming back, and they were thinking that he's going to come back and fight with us now. And he came and he said, what do I do now? They're like, what do you mean? Just go. Like, no, I want to become Muslim. So, you can never judge a book by its cover, as they say. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu was going to kill the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but after listening to a few verses of the Quran, it had such a strong impact on him that it melted him and he became Muslim. So you never know what a person is going through, and thus having topics, for example, let's say just an idea that if we have a topic, a flyer that says domestic abuse in Islam, or the prohibition of domestic abuse in Islam. Maybe there's a woman that passes by, she's being abused badly at home. And she says, you know what, I want to read this, because at that time she's open to anybody that is there to console her. And she reads it, and maybe they'll say, you know what, this is beautiful, I want to hear more about this, and this could open the new door to many things. So the next little topic we have is actually, he gives some guidelines with regards to what type of literature you should be giving out. So even these flyers, what exactly it is that you are giving out, be very careful. Literature, he says, is no substitute for personal human contact. Okay, so you can't just do da'wah through flyers only. Flyers and people have to work together. Sometimes the flyers work better, sometimes the people work better, but you need to have both for an effective da'wah program. Only time, he says, time and time again, people, like many communities, their da'wah program is standing on the street and just passing out flyers. And they'll say, hey, our da'wah work is not effective. Much of the da'wah work, he says, the da'wah literature that is in circulation today is plagued with spelling errors and boring writing and improper use of grammar. So these are all things that we need to be careful about. I actually read a book which was a very beneficial book to me, which was How to Get Your Point Across in 30 Seconds. It's a short little book, and it said that if you are talking to somebody, you only have 30 seconds before they start thinking about something else. So if you need to get your point across, you need to have less than 30-second message. Everything should be in there. So actually, based on that, I actually made some kind of like a dawah paragraph that we would stand on the street and I would say that as we are giving out flyers. So the idea is that as a guy starts to hear me, as they are in the hearing zone, as they walk from there to the end of it, they would have heard that complete message. And alhamdulillah, it was very effective, and people would come and they would want more. And then the next thing that we would do on the table is that we would have a sign-up sheet where they could write their contact information for us. At the very least, we would give them something that had our contact. But if not, if we could get them to write their contact, that was really good, because then we could call them or email them, invite them to other programs. And sometimes if somebody was really interested and they were asking a lot of questions, maybe in a few days you call them and say, hey, we met on the street and I wanted to know if you have any more questions, if you wanted to go out for coffee. We don't know how many people would find this to be like an easy way to come towards Islam. He says, try the time-proven test before handing out any type of literature. Read it yourself first. A lot of times when you write something, when you're writing it, there are some mistakes that you just don't see. You just don't see it. Somebody else has to see it. So if it's written by somebody else, when you read it, you will see that mistake. So actually what I do is I have a program, which is like, I can do that right now, which is that I can select any text and press a button.
Time-proven test before handing out any type of literature. Read it yourself first. Did it.
So it will read it out to me. So actually before I send out my important stuff, I actually have the computer read it to me, because listening to it brings me up to some mistakes that I haven't read. And then I'll send it to somebody else. Like, Dr. Fadl is our head spelling and grammar check when we send the articles to the newspaper. And sometimes, there are mistakes that I read it like 3 times, but I just didn't see it. So it's always good to do that. And he says, ask yourself these questions. Did this hold your attention? Did this hold your attention? And in the beginning, when I write the 550 word column, in the beginning I was like, man, we need more words. But now I realize it's just the perfect length. It's not too long, it's not too short. If it's any longer than that, then people would lose interest. So I actually like it now. Was it interesting? Did you detect any errors or phrases that could have been expressed better? And remember that non-Muslims will be unconsciously looking for anything to justify ignoring this message. Shaitan is whispering in the back of their head, don't listen to this. This is not good stuff. So don't let them ignore it because of poor English. He says the golden rules for distributing literature. Read everything yourself first. Never settle for any material that is merely acceptable. Never settle for material that's just, okay, we don't have anything else, let's just give this out. Don't settle for that. Go for the best. Never appear over eager to hand things out. You know, like some people, they're like forcing flyers into people's hand. You don't have to do that. It makes people nervous. Never load down a person with too much to read. Take this and this and this and this and this, and let me give you a Quran, and here's a video, and here's this and here's that. Give him some. Don't corner someone with a lecture about Islam. Whenever they take a pamphlet, and don't be drawn into political arguments that have nothing to do with our faith. Keep a tidy appearance. The messenger is noticed just as much as the message. And if you think about like some of the other faiths, when they have their people go out for da'wah, they are dressed very well. You know, they are dressed very well. One time in New York, I remember this very vividly, because it was such a disturbing experience to me that I was in a train full of people coming home from college, and this one brother who recognized me to be Muslim came and started talking about, you know, how important it is to give the message of Islam and spread the good things about Islam. And this brother's hair was going all over. His shirt was unbuttoned up to here. The chest hair was coming out, and his breath smelled really bad. And he basically was dressed like a homeless person. And he was there to, you know, how beautiful Islam is. And I was like, oh my God. And here it was me, a Muslim, hearing him and being disturbed. Imagine a non-Muslim hearing that. So these are things that we need to pay attention to. Keep a record of what is taken and what is left. A good inventory list creates efficiency and helpful statistics. That, you know, when we are running out of flyers, or for example, if you have a lot of different types of flyers and there's one flyer which is going more than others. People are taking, for example, women in Islam. That would tell you, okay, maybe there's something going on here that we have to take a deeper look. Why is this flyer going up more? If there's a flyer about racism going out more, then that actually shows you an opening that, you know what, this is a topic that people are interested in and we could focus on it more. Provide some mechanism for follow-up, whether it is an address or website stamped on the literature or a flyer with useful address.
أشهد أن
So, Bismillah. So he says, if you don't find anything that is suitable for your needs, by all means write something yourself, and then have a few brothers and sisters look at it with a critical eye. A possible strategy to distribute literature might be, he says, he gives a bunch of examples. Number one is to mail flyers to people or to place ads in newspaper, providing an address where people can write for more information. Letters can be sent to politicians. And you know, this is something that I wish we did more about this, which is actually having a communication with politicians, because they say that what Muhammad Ali did, for example, for Islam, is better and more powerful with regards to Islam, is maybe more than 100 imams. Because when Muhammad Ali became Muslim and he took Islam to the main stage, Islam and Muslims became a household name. So we should really dedicate some time to actually speaking with politicians, sending them letters. You never know what might happen as a result of that letter. So especially, for example, I make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bill Clinton, such a charming personality. He was too charming in some cases. So such a charming personality that they said that if he goes to a restaurant, he doesn't walk out from the front door, but after he's done, he goes in the back and meets all the chefs and the assistants and all of them, and then comes out the back door. That type of person, that type of personality becoming Muslim is, hundreds, thousands of du'at, imams and shuyukh cannot do the da'wah that person can do, even though he's not so knowledgeable about Islam. So we should really look into that. I also really make dua for Jimmy Carter. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him Islam before he dies. A very good person at heart. A very good person, very caring person. And for him, I make dua for his own sake. For his own sake, that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide him. If you remember that he gave a speech to America, he said America has become too wasteful. And they said that one of the reasons why he lost was because he insisted on carrying his own bag and his coat. And they said, look, we have somebody, because when you do that, then the foreign leaders look at you and they say, this guy is weak. And when Reagan ran against him, he acted like kingly, on purpose to kind of show that I'm presidential and he's like a regular person. But, alhamdulillah, he stuck to his principles. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide him. Billboards could be rented. Billboards could be rented, and again, we are in the process of discussing, for example, an LED sign when we raise our masjid sign, as an idea that this could be very effective, because everybody that's driving by, we could give them a message about Islam. When we have an open house, we could say, open house today, all are welcome. And some people, they may not have ever thought about going. When they see open house, all are welcome. And we could be crafty with our messages. We could actually take advantage of that. Like for example, when like hurricane comes or something like that, if there's if there's some incident in our neighborhood, a message over there would be very helpful to let people feel that we are part of it. May Allah protect us. If there's a child that's abducted, we use our billboard to say, looking for this child, call police for any tips. People say, okay, these people are not living their own life, they're part of the community. It's a very, very effective tool. I just hope we can get through all the bureaucracy and get there. Business cards with Dawah phone numbers could be distributed. And he says a special note about books. He says, don't sell books to those who are seeking Islam for the first time. Say, you're interested in reading about Islam, this is $5, this is $7. If they're interested in reading about Islam, give it to them. That's where it's worth it to put our money, and we should be willing to donate that. Many people may not feel comfortable buying books at a table in the hall of a building or the bazaar or like the flea market atmosphere, which is because this. For example, if you go to a bookstore where people buy books, these people have done their research as to how people buy books, and most of the bookstores today, they have a cafe there, okay, and they have comfortable seating there, and basically you go there, and even the music that is playing is actually researched, that this is something that would make them comfortable and at ease and make them feel homely. So when they pick up a book, they feel so comfortable, they say, if I take this book home, I will continue to feel discomfort at home. Subhanallah, talk about vision. There's actually there are some masajid, one in Boston, where they actually have a cafe in the masjid with Wi-Fi and nice sofas. So when people go to Panera or like Starbucks to go work there, this is actually open for them to come and work there. And they have a library about Islam, for example. So people can come and they could get a book from there, sit in the cafe, get some books, and sit there comfortably and read. So, there's a book I read. It's a really good book called How to Be a Billionaire. And it's a study of the current billionaires in the world. And the case study for Sam Walton is that Sam Walton didn't do anything new. He simply went to other stores that were doing good and copied their ideas and brought them to Walmart. And then those stores died and Walmart survived. So the idea here is, if there's another church or a masjid or synagogue that has a good idea that's working, we should bring that and implement that in our thing as well. So we become the Walmart and they become the little store that dies. Anything you put on a Dawah table, book table, should be free if your sole object is Dawah. If you're giving books to friends to read, don't give them a really bulky book at first. Give them a light, quick and easy book to read, because a big bulky book, they may never read it. Give them something small with an interesting theme. Also, with regards to giving Quran, majority of the scholars, they agree that the non-Muslims should not be given Arabic Quran. Okay, they should not be given Arabic Quran. Now, with regards to English only, so they say that the Arabic part is something that requires wudu for it to be touched. So if you're giving it to non-Muslims, number one, it shouldn't have Arabic in there. Number two is that you have to pay attention to what translation it is, how it's translated. Because very commonly, if you ask somebody, can you give me a translation of the Quran, they have like thou and ye and that type of English in there, which is a Victorian English, and that's something that people just, people, especially younger people, don't read that stuff anymore. I can't read that stuff. It's so difficult for me to understand. So, alhamdulillah, you have, for example, Furqan Foundation that specializes in da'wah to non-Muslims. So the Quran that they publish, which is, alhamdulillah, we have those, they are specifically tailored towards a non-Muslim audience, a younger non-Muslim audience. And it begins with a very nice, I've read it, it's just amazing, an introduction to Islam written by Dr. Zakir Naik. And you really read that and you're like, wow, this makes Islam look good. And then you go on. So if you give somebody just the Quran without anything else in the front or back, that's not enough. So the introduction to Islam, some information about basics of Islam, and contact information, and then the Quran in it too, that is a more useful tool. That is a more useful tool. And again, also, it might also be a good idea, which Brother George agrees with, I can tell from this, that it might not be the best idea to give a random person a Quran. Okay? Give them some lighter book, a flyer. If they're interested, then give them a Quran. Then give them a Quran. Okay, so we have 7:05. We have a few. So then he has a section on mass media, which is not really that useful for us. TV, radio, and you have internet and video. So now this book was written like 10 years ago, and the internet of 10 years ago and today is vastly different. And there's so much saturation of information. So if you go to, for example, it's called the Grand Bazaar in Turkey, in Istanbul.
Mm-hmm.
Is it called the Grand Bazaar?
Yes. In English.
In English, what is it? So it's just like, huh?
Kapalı çarşı.
Oh, I can't pronounce that. But basically you go there and you have just thousands of stores in there, okay? And sometimes you're so surprised that there's like 17 stores that are selling exactly the same thing, okay? And somehow they're all making money. However, the internet has kind of become like that, where there's like millions of websites about Islam and against Islam and videos on YouTube. So you really have to think about doing things which are eye-catching, that are out of the ordinary. And if you need to do something which already exists, by all means, use that. It shouldn't always be by my Dawah website has to be promoted. If there's something else, alhamdulillah, let it be promoted and let it be used. And then he has, a thing about video, for example. So one of the most common things now is a video. With the YouTube, for example, you could send a quick link to somebody, and that could be, it's audio visual. Okay, so there is something that you're seeing and something that you're hearing, which is more effective than just talking to a person in some cases, and especially with the cell phone devices, you could send a quick video to somebody. So Islamically oriented videos and television shows are generally well planned and reasonably entertaining, because if they're not that, then they wouldn't exist. It requires, I have done quite a few videos. You know that my major was media and communication arts with a focus on film and video production, and I specialize in documentary. And I just made a video a few days ago, which some of you might see on Facebook, and it took me like maybe 1 week of work for 1 hour and 1 minute and 44 seconds of video. So if it's not good enough, you're not gonna have any reason to make it. So these are things that we could look into. Documentaries, lectures, and even feature films are available, and they can be used selectively in terms of dawah. If your area has not been blessed by a weekly Islamic presentation of some type, organize a committee to arrange one. Okay, so this is a very important one. There are, for example, public access TV stations where most people don't watch, but there are some people that are watching them. And those places, they are low budget type of places, and you can actually go and you could buy an hour on air. You could buy an hour on air, and last week I shared with you that in Atlantic City, there was a radio show, and we used to buy an hour from them once a month, and we would go and talk about Islam. We would talk about Islam. And, you know, people were hearing, and especially it was going in a heavily Republican area on AM radio. And people were listening, and, you know, da'wah is like a long term, it's a long game. Okay, you don't basically throw the seed today and the grass comes out tomorrow. Rather, you throw the seed, you water it over time. Sometimes you even forget about it, but it is growing underground. Eventually it comes up. So that's something that we could look into, that we could actually get time on local TV stations, buy it if we have to. And we go, now the reality is that TV stations are actually in need of good programming. Okay, you know that you have, for example, ABC, you have CBS, you have these. So the what's the body that governs them? FCC, a Federal Communications Commission. So they require that the network, which is headquartered, is usually in New York sometimes, right? They are only allowed to provide 40% of the programming. 60% of the programming has to be locally produced. Okay, so for example, on NPR, when you listen to NPR, only 40% of the programming comes from headquarters in DC from NPR. The rest of the program has to be locally produced. So that's why you have the morning talk shows, for example, that talk about Georgia politics. Okay, and you have all of these local shows they are required. And they are in shortage. They need good programs, because, you know, if one good program is doing good today, it's not going to be doing good 10 years from now. You know, mostly they have a shelf life of 5 or 6 years, and people lose interest. They have to switch it up. So if smart and intelligent Muslims could come up with programming which kind of indirectly hints at Islam and positive messages, that could actually be a very good dawah technique as well. And you have, for example, alhamdulillah, even with nowadays, in the insertion of Muslim characters in completely non-Muslim shows, even that has an impact, because there are people that have never seen a brown person before. And they get to see them through that, and it actually opens the door to say, okay, you know, for example, they may show them praying. And somebody watching in, like, you know, rural Indiana might actually go and research that issue, and it would open the door for them. Okay, cassettes, outdated. Okay, radio, again, radio is expensive. CDs are also outdated now. Nowadays, you basically have YouTube, and you can send a link to somebody. Other than that, it's all irrelevant for the most part. But remember and understand that there might be some, for example, senior citizens might still have CD players at home. They might have DVD players at home. So they might have a cassette player at home. So, you know, maybe just target that properly. And if Islamic-oriented programming could be accomplished in areas of high Muslim concentration, then a great service will be rendered to the Ummah and to Dawah. Imagine broadcasting the Quran with live translation, on the airwaves, or news from the Muslim perspective, or Muslim talk shows and variety programs. He gives an idea, WAHY FM. Wahi. WAHY FM. Broadcast time can be purchased on some stations which specialize in mixed programming. Okay, so we have some guidelines, which is the next topic, which is da'wah in the home. And this is a very important one, which is implementable by each and every single one of us, which is what can we do at home to begin the da'wah, because da'wah begins at home. If you are giving da'wah outside, but there's no good stuff happening at home, then this is a problem. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. O you who believe, save yourselves and your family from the fire. So the da'wah begins at home, and this is something. Now it doesn't mean that if somebody's family is not so practicing that he shouldn't do da'wah outside. But we need to focus on that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as one of the earliest commands, وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ, and warn your relatives that are near to you. So the Prophet ﷺ, he began the da'wah. Sheikh Yasir Qadhi, he doesn't call it the secret da'wah as some of the historians have called it. He calls it private da'wah, where the Prophet ﷺ is privately contacting the people that are close to him and inviting them to Islam. And one of the things that the Prophet did is that when he would go and speak to an individual, and for example with Abu Bakr and Uthman, he didn't say that Allah has sent me as a messenger to mankind. He said, Allah has sent me as a messenger to you. Allah has sent me as a messenger to you. Personalize the message. And this obviously has an impact when, for example, one of the khutbahs that I heard when I was maybe 12 years old, 13 years old, I was in madrasa and there was a traveling speaker. And this was something that I still remember where I was sitting in that masjid. He said, Allah mentions you in the Quran. And I was like, how could Allah mention me? And then he gave on examples of how, Allah describes different types of people. And you go and you find yourself described in the Quran. And I went and I actually checked and I was like, wow, this is an amazing book that Allah mentions us individually. You have, for example, the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said to Ubay bin Ka'b that Allah has ordered me to recite Surah Al-Bayyinah to you. He said, Ya Rasulullah, Allah has mentioned me by name. I actually
Yep,
have
it's
it.
back.
Okay. I hope that if you like some good ideas, you take notes and not just say, oh, the video will come out.
Yeah, we are waiting for the video.
Okay. So the parents have a tremendous responsibility to nurture and guide the family unit. Now, their responsibility is to teach Islam in the best way possible. In the best way possible, their responsibility is until the children are dependent on them. Okay, because sometimes people have come to me and they say, my son is 21 years old and he doesn't pray. Am I responsible for this? Every time he doesn't pray, am I sinful for this? And I said to them that if you did your part when they were younger and they could be influenced by you, if you did your part at that time, then you are not sinful, because this type of guidance is in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you didn't do your part, if you were busy in other things at the time, then you better make tawbah, and you have to really, if your own child escaped your hands and it's too late for now, the only thing you can do is make dua for them, then you need to protect yourself by maybe, helping out in a youth program, that maybe through your efforts, another child in your child's place could be guided, so the sin that you earned there could be equaled out by the reward that you earned there. But this is a very, very important thing that we all need to do, but may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us in our families. Dawah in the home can sometimes keep the internet specifically for masjid use, so we could turn off the public access. But I haven't been able to convince anybody yet. Okay. Dawah in the home consists of these aspects that we talked about. some important features of an Islamically oriented home include, so here he gives a few tips. Number one is that the authority of the father and the respect of the mother must be maintained, or the authority of the parents. And obviously, you know, in Islam, Islam teaches as an example of the Prophet that there is consultation, but Islam has, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الرجال قوامون على النساء, that there is a degree that Allah has